Welcome one and all. It's time to take a trip into Spice Town. Yet another Kings of War tournament report. Cold Up North 22. And the Nightstalkers are back, baby. So, strap yourself in, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. I've got my list right here in hand, and you can see on this thumbnail here, which for some reason has been hideously shrunk down right here, so you can't quite see all of it, but you can obviously see that there are Nightstalkers in it. Let's just get rid of that, and before we get onto my opponent's list from the first game, we'll have a look at my list, which you can see in miniature form here, and I'll read through and tell you precisely what everything is and whether I have a specific plan for any of it. Let me know if there are any issues with the audio on this episode, by the way, because my usual microphone is broken and waiting to be replaced, so I'm currently borrowing one, which should be identical, but you never know with these things. It could have messed up some settings in there somewhere. Okay, so, as you can see, we've got a Shadow Hulk. I should tell you this is 2,300 points, by the way. 5 games, and there's no weirdness, no strange army selection rules, no special characters or anything like that. Just straight up 2,300 points, and Shadow Hulk. Soul Flayers. Phantoms. So, this is the first time the Phantoms have come out to play. Similar to the Shadow Hounds that are down there, both speed 10. The Phantoms, though, fly, and they have an extra couple of attacks, but they don't have the Thunderous Charge or the regeneration that I always forget to use with the Shadow Hounds anyway, and their nerve is pretty low, so they tend to die fast regardless. So you will find also, during this tournament, there are a few incidents of accidental cheating or accidental reverse cheating, making some of my units worse than they're actually supposed to be. So one of them is that I forgot for the entire event that my Shadow Hounds do have regeneration. So occasionally it would have come up. Let's see what else I had forgotten. So the Banshee that I've taken, which you probably can't see at the moment because it's too small, but you will be able to see in the close-ups shortly. The Banshee is the upgraded one that has the resonant chorus and the Zephyr crown as well. So you're not going to be able to take that combo anymore, because what it does, it lets the Banshee have 2 lots of Wind Blast 8 that it can target at 2 different units. However, one bit of that rule that I neglected because I haven't used it before is that they have to be within 6 inches of each other, the 2 units that you target. So I totally forgot that for most of this event until someone else, who presumably knows that unit better than I do, told me later in the day. So I did also ignore that. And in this first game, in fact, my opponent accidentally cheated as well by increasing the range on one of the spells, which we'll get to shortly. So there are going to be some mistakes in this one. So the Phantoms and the Banshee are both new. We've got Butchers here, and they've got Potion of the Caterpillar, which is soon to be going away in the new book. We've got more Soul Flayers. These are the Rune Wars Carrion Lancers, which are representing Soul Flayers at the moment in my list. And Soul Flayers do take a bit of a hit in the new book actually, which this tournament is not using. So if I decide they're not worth taking lots of anymore, then I can just use these as Fiends instead. We've got a regiment of Reapers with the Brew of Sharpness. And the Reapers are taking a bit of a hit soon as well, actually. So it's the last hurrah for some of these units in their most powerful form. So the Reapers, with Brew of Sharpness, it means that they have 25 attacks, hitting on 2s because of that, with Crushing Strength 1. Which is fairly devastating, especially because I've taken a Horror in the list as well, who has Bane Chant 2 and the Conjurer's Staff. So very good chance of getting that Bane Chant successful. And he's also got a bit of Lightning Bolt. I think he's hiding just down there. You can't quite see him yet. We've got a horde of Scarecrows. Standard, just for unlocking stuff, and they're cheap, and they can stand in the way of things and soak up some punishment. 2 Mind Screeches, because I don't have a third one, and they're really good. They're the Shadow Hounds that I mentioned earlier, and 2 more regiments of Soul Flayers. So we've got 4 regiments of Soul Flayers. The most I've ever heard of in the list was probably about 8, an obscene amount, and that's probably why they're taking a bit of a speed hit in the next book, which isn't in effect yet. So I'm still using them at full capacity. Did I neglect to mention any upgrades? Let's see. I don't believe so. Okay then. This first game is Dominate scenario. You can see the center point is marked there, and I'm up against the Sylvan Kin. So here is the enemy list. We've got Nightstalkers, which are apparently the grotesque filth of the Sylvan Kin forces. There are 2 units of those, and you can see they've got special rules all over the place. Elite, Pathfinder, Scout, Stealthy. So lots of Scout in this list, as you would have seen in that first image. Forest Shamblers, who are upgraded to the Awakened Guardians, so that they gain Elite and Rallying to Elves. Greater Air Elemental, and this is one thing I underestimated because it's obviously got a pretty powerful profile for less than 200 points. And also, it has Nimble, which is something I overlooked when facing this, and you'll see how that factors into the game shortly. 2 Tree Herders, one of them upgraded to the Wilt Father, who loses Radiance of Life and gains Cloak of Death instead. So 1 Radiance of Life, 1 Cloak of Death. And yeah, that one's just a bit more powerful. There's some Surge from those 2 as well. A couple of Elven Archmages. One with Inspiring Talisman, Bane Chant, Scorched Earth. I can't even remember what that does now, you know, because I don't remember it being used. But this one has Alchemist's Curse, which has been around for a while in slightly different forms. This particular version of it, you gain more dice based on the defense of the unit you're targeting. It used to be that it would wound on the reverse of the defense, something like that. So if it was defense 6, it would wound on 2s, I believe. But it's changed a bit now. But it's still very, very potent. And pretty spicy. I think it just has Piercing 4 as standard Alchemist's Curse now. Apparently that's how it works. But is it the Crown of the Wizard King that increases the range on spells? But apparently it's only on friendly spells, not offensive ones. So that was the accidental bit of cheating from my opponent in this game to counteract the accidental bit that I was doing. 2 Forest Guard regiments. 1 with Mead of Madness. 2 Bosk Wraith troops. And Elven King with Wanderer. So, there's not a great deal of speed. There's 1 fast unit, everything else fairly mediocre speed. And when you compare that to my army, it's obviously much slower. Lots of infantry compared to my lots of speed 10. How many have I got? I've got 4 regiments of Soul Flayers, I've got the Phantoms, I've got the Shadow Hounds, and I've got the Banshee that are all speed 10, which is a significant amount. And most of the rest of the stuff I've got is speed 6, so it isn't even outsped by anything on the opposing army. Now, one thing that's caught me out before is not looking at the fact that most of my opponent's army has Scout. In this game, I did pay attention to that, and you'll notice I haven't deployed anything on the front row that I really care if it gets charged. Because with the amount of movement and surge available, probably not going to be able to charge 2 things in the first turn, based on the list. So I don't think a single unit is going to take out Butchers or Scarecrows. And I've put some chaff on the front as well, because I don't care about it, and I think it would be a bit of a tactical mistake to be using up Surge to surge a powerful unit into some Shadow Hounds right in front of my lines, so they could get smushed. But a lot of scouting has taken place, apart from things that can't scout, which are obviously left behind. With it being Dominate, obviously you want to lay a claim to this area early on, especially, perhaps, because I've got so much Wind Blast. I've got Wind Blast 16 with the Banshee, I've got 2 lots of Wind Blast 6 on the 2 Mind Screechers, and then 4 lots of Wind Blast 5 on the Soul Flayers. So if you allow yourself to get blasted backwards in this scenario, it might be quite difficult to actually get there as the game goes on. So we can look down my forces now. On this flank, we've got the Shadow Hulk, Phantoms, Soul Flayers. This is some impassable terrain here, as is that one, by the way. That's also impassable terrain right in the middle, so that's going to limit the area that we're allowed to actually sit in. Got the Butchers. Reapers obviously deployed slightly further back because they do not like to be hit by anything. Mind Screechers always hiding behind Scarecrows because they're not going to be giving any cover to opponents by lightning bolting over the top of them. there's the Banshee chilling out there, and the Horror is just perched on the corner here. The Horror is mostly, presumably in this event, going to be trying to put the Bane chant onto the Reapers, unless the thing they're going to hit is already going to get slaughtered, in which case they'll look around for a different target. And some more Soul Flayers over here. So, what is the plan? Because obviously, it's right in my face immediately. What I would like to do, typically with this army, is get Soul Flayers onto the flanks, look inwards, especially while they're still speed 10, and smush. However, they're not nimble, Soul Flayers, so unless you have them lined up the turn before, the only way you can actually achieve that in the best way possible is to charge something and kill it, and then you get the free pivot at the end of combat, of course, if you succeed. So, you've got to line them up the turn before, and as you can see, they're not lined up totally down the flanks here. So what they would like to do is charge into one of these feeble-looking archer units, perhaps. And I think, are they archers? I'll have to check in a moment. But charge into something like that, kill it, pivot, turn inwards, and face down the enemy. And on this side, these ones would like to do something similar, but it doesn't look like anything's coming forward on this side. So we're probably going to use them to try and chase down archers instead. And things in the front I don't really care about. Keeping the Reapers safe. Shadow Hulk can absorb quite a bit of punishment. Now my list doesn't really have any healing in it apart from the regeneration, which I ignored for the entire tournament on the Shadow Hounds. Hello Maggers42, you did catch the live stream. So, turn 1. My opponent elected to go first after doing all those scout moves, and you can see that there is a little bit of charging going on because there was some wild charge, which meant that certain charges were going to be possible without surge. And you can see that these guys made it into the Butchers. The small unit made it into the Shadow Hounds. I'm not concerned about that one. Obviously, you don't want a lucky roll to take out the Butchers this early, especially at this point in the game, because all the enemy inspiring sources are far back at this point. So it's the same with shooting actually for Nightstalkers. Often people say that their shooting is going to be wasted against Nightstalkers because they're all stealthy. But if you've got a significant amount, then really a lot of Nightstalker units have slightly lower defense than they would normally do because of the stealthy, in my opinion. And they lack inspiring until they get near you. So for the first couple of turns you're shooting them. The fact that they're stealthy I don't think really counteracts the fact that their defences aren't necessarily that high and they don't have any inspiring nearby at all. So lucky rolls are their bane. Over on this side, not much going on. The archers obviously aren't going to be in any hurry to engage over there. So the Wiltfather is the darker of the two trees, which is that one. This is the less powerful one here. Archers plinking away damage onto the Shadow Hulk, got it up to 6. And remember, I'm not going to be getting any of these wounds back. And with the surging, these Shamblers get surged into the Scarecrows. So 3 combats. Butchers take some damage, which is a decent amount. On 7, they're not going to be worried this turn, but anything else hits them, they are going to be a bit scared. Scarecrows take some wounds, and the Shadow Hounds are killed. So this unit is obviously going to get mauled to death. Shamblers might do, depending what I choose to put into them. And this unit, you'd expect the Butchers to munch on them, with any luck. So, turn 1 for me. The Phantoms, unable to charge because these archers did not want to be in range. So I've sent them up onto the other side of the wall, just in front of the unit, blocking them off. And everyone else has just moved up. Soul Flayers have gone up onto the hill, they've got a good view of the battlefield, and the Shadow Hulk is threatening to charge in over there shortly. The Butchers don't actually do that much damage to these Blade Stalkers, but they do waver them, which is good. I decide not to throw multiple units into these Shamblers. I think I've got time in this game. Even though I'm facing a reasonable amount of shooting, I don't have to get very far, so I don't need to be in any rush to clear out this roadblock and get to the centre, really. So we can just trade a bit back and forth there. You can see that my Soul Flayers did go after that unit and murder it, as expected. Now, here's where I forgot about the Nimble of the Air Elemental. Because it's a surgeable unit, which I was aware of, but the fact that it's facing this way meant that the fact that it's nimble means it's going to be relatively straightforward to get into the flank of these Soul Flayers, which is something I definitely overlooked. So that's a bad point there. You can see where I've dealt out some shooting damage and wind blasted various things because they seem to have retreated a bit. And we've got a big congested area here. I'm just blasting all the more powerful things that I don't really want to fight. The trees a bit further back while I deal with this menace. Turn 2 for the Sylvankin, so there we go. As I said, it's going to be surged into the flank there quite easily. And down here you can see these Bladestalkers have come in. Now, what was there? So there was actually nothing there. They've just come forward and sat there. And over on this side, we've got the regular tree herder hugging the piece of impassable terrain in the centre, which contains the centre of the dominate zone. Wiltfather heading over there to do a bit of surging, and the mage, and this foot hero here. This one's actually decent in combat. And these archers are obviously going to start blasting. Flank surge into the Soul Flayers, and that would be the Cloak of Death damage there from the Wiltfather. These Scarecrows are actually taken down this time, so they're toast. That's all the damage they took, 19. And it's obviously not going to end too well for this unit because I've got them surrounded by lots of awful things. Those Soul Flayers do get killed with that flank charge that would have been easily avoided. All I had to do was pivot them less and it would have been impossible to reach the flank. So there you go. Make sure you study your opponent's army list a little bit and figure out which things are nimble. Always important. So what am I going to do in this turn? These Soul Flayers have got some options. I believe they can see down here if they wanted to join in with that fight. They can also go up there. Here I've got the Reapers that could go into this flank. However, what I'm actually going to do with them is charge this tree herder. And that leaves a space for these Soul Flayers to get the flank of the Shamblers. These ones can potentially go for this unit, or they could charge off up there. I can shoot that unit off because I've got lots of lightning bolt here, and I've got the damaging wind blast from the Banshee as well. So turn 2, I decide to double charge the archers with Soul Flayers and Phantoms, and comically enough, only waver them. The Butchers push through and do some massacring, as expected, and I do decide to push the Soul Flayers on the left into the Wiltfather. Okay, so slightly funny incident here. I pushed them in to do damage so that they couldn't surge this. However, I think I then tried to damage that with Wind Blast and pushed it back slightly too far so that it now can see them, because the Wind Blast was too effective. So that's quite funny. I didn't manage to shoot this unit off, but you can see they're damaged. And I did one-shot the tree herder with the Reapers because they're absolute monsters. And the front here has been completely cleared. And in terms of units left alive, it's looking very healthy for me at this stage. However, there is damage on the Butchers, so they're a bit vulnerable. And obviously I've got a good shot at having a fair few units in the dominate zone at this stage. But we're still early. Turn 3, so obviously that flank happens because I wind blasted it too far. Bladestalkers charge the Mind Screech. The Phantoms are, I believe they're just shot to bits by this unit, so they're gone. Mind Screech only takes 4 damage and does not die. The Reapers are charged in the flank and they waver immediately. And this is the downside to the Reapers. Whatever they hit, they tend to annihilate, unless it's ridiculously powerful with outrageous defense. However, as soon as something hits them, waver or dead probably. So in this instance, they are wavered. Soul Flayers there are dead. And at this point, what I'm thinking is, I've got double Wind Blast 8 on the Banshee. If the Banshee stays alive, I can just keep pushing these two back as long as they're not behind each other. And even if they are, I can just, depending, I'm not sure if they're the same height actually. If one's directly behind the other, I might not be able to see both of them. So if one was behind the other, coming towards me, then obviously their vision would be affected by that. One of them is surgeable though, so there are things you can do to avoid being wind blasted, and these two don't look like they're going to be employing those techniques, so I'm just going to start blasting them away and hold on to this area, mop up down here, and then hope that the archers can't get too involved in the game because they could cause some pain with the butchers damaged. But it's looking good at the moment. Turn 3, so shoot down those Nightstalkers, finish them off. Lots of lightning bolt. Wind blast the Wiltfather and the air elemental. Is he far away now, so they're out of charge range. So it is a risk because the Banshee can only blast each one. Wind blast 8, so on average you're going to get 4, and you have to stand within 18 inches to use wind blast. So you have to blast them 3 inches away successfully. So it doesn't take the most obscene failure ever to leave the Banshee within charge range. So it is a risk. If you can find a safe place to do it, then that is preferable. On this side, obviously the archer unit is finished off, and the Soul Flayers are looking this way. So they're threatening those archers. So looking very, very good at the moment. Soul Flayers do get wavered in the next turn though, as a result of all this shooting that comes their way. And the Reapers are dead as well. This guy on his own murdered them all. So that was a bit of an unhealthy turn. You can see these two making their way slowly up again. Turn 4. Whoosh, blast them back again. So at this stage it may have turned into cheating, let me see. Yeah, they're probably too far apart to actually legally do this now. So I am aware now that you're not allowed to blast 2 units that are more than 6 inches apart with the upgraded Banshee. Whether people take the upgraded Banshee soon anyway, with the slight hit it's taken in the new book, we'll see. And in the middle, I do waver this guy by shooting him up. And okay, so it's still looking healthy. I've still got some decent unit strength in the dominate zone. My opponent does not. And the archers finish off my Soul Flayers though. So they're dead. And they're making their way back to the centre again. And 5 for me, so repositioning. I'm hiding the butchers so they can't be seen by the archers. And then I'm going to keep wind blasting them away. On this occasion, I'm not sure if I wind blasted it far enough away. I think I maybe only rolled 1 success on the air elemental. So that means it can now actually charge the Banshee. And then obviously overrun into the butchers. So a little bit too confident there perhaps. I'm hiding this Mind Screech because it's damaged. And I can still easily get it into the scoring zone because it flies. And move it 12 inches so it'll be able to get there. And onto the next turn. Turn 6, Air Elemental, that wasn't pushed back far enough, charges into the Banshee. You'd expect it to murder. There's the Wiltfather, so he's definitely in the game now. I can't push him back and expect him not to participate anymore. The archers are working their way into the dominate zone as well, so I'm going to try and start pushing them out soon. So they shoot up the Mind Screech a bit. Banshee is killed. They overrun into the butchers, but look at that. Wavering the butchers. Plenty of damage, but only a waver. And they do actually gain a point of damage there because we remembered the Cloak of Death, but thankfully they were still only wavered as a result of that, which meant that they can Fury charge into the Air Elemental and eat it. So the Air Elemental's dead. I've decided that this Mind Screech is not going to try and Lightning Bolt anything. He's just going to head up there, try and stop the archers from getting in a really difficult to stop position because they're a high-scoring unit. The butchers are very close to death. Anything that hits them, they're going to die, and they're my highest unit strength available at the moment. I've only got these soul flayers, who are worth 2, and the 2 mind screeches that are worth 1 each. Wiltfather is worth 1, not going to kill him by the end of the game probably. And these archers, who are also only on 1 damage, are worth 3, I think. So at the moment, it's going to be a draw if they manage to get in the zone. So that's as close as I could get to them to hold them up. And we do get turn 7. So if it had ended here, I would have won, because the archers aren't scoring at the moment. They're not close enough, they need to come a bit further. However, we do get turn 7, which on the one hand is a positive because it'll give me more time to kill stuff. On the other hand, I might not actually win the game. Let's see. Won't miss that Banshee now after with the ding it's taken. Yes, that Banshee. Don't play silly games with your Banshees, folks. Don't sit right in front of an important unit and then take a risk with the number of wind blast you need. Not wise. So in turn 7, the archers charge into the Mind Screech. If they kill the Mind Screech and overrun, that's probably game over. They probably win. And the butchers are dead. So this was a slightly illegal move, I think, as well. One of the several in this game that we both did by mistake. So the Alchemist's Curse, I don't think, should have the range to hit them. But the upgrade was applied to offensive spells as well. So one thing that this mage could have done is sit behind the archers. However, had it done so, it wouldn't have been able to attack the butchers and kill them. So it would have been no good. So that is presumably why this mage did not sit behind the archers to stop them being wind blasted, because it needed to be out here to be able to actually take out the butchers. If the butchers aren't dead, it doesn't matter anyway, because they've got unit strength 3. Mind Screech does not die, thankfully. Butchers are dead though. Soul Flayers are thankfully not dead also. If they died, that would have been very, very dicey. So, going into my turn 7, I am currently, let's see, yeah, so at this point I was winning because of the butchers. Now I don't have the butchers, now suddenly it's a draw. Into my turn 7 I need to kill something or push it out of the zone. What have I got that I can push with? I have got Mind Screech, and I've got Soul Flayers. Mind Screech doesn't have that much pushing capability, so it's going to be a bit dicey to do that. Can the Soul Flayers kill a Wiltfather who's only on about... Well, in fact, no, they can't. Look at that. They do damage him, but don't kill him. And then the Mind Screech manages to push these archers a few inches away. But is it going to be enough to take them mostly outside of 12 of the centre? Yes, look at that. If he'd pushed them away 1 inch less, then they would have stayed in there, and it would have been a draw. Well, can't get much closer than that, can you? 1 less success on the dice, and it would have been a draw. As it is, it's a win. Mistakes were made. Not only tactical mistakes, but also rules mistakes on both sides, with comical outcomes. But there you go, it's a win in the first round. Can't argue with that. Getting used to some of these units. I haven't taken a list with this much speed ever in the past, so that's taking some getting used to. Especially the fact that the Soul Flayers aren't nimble. Can't treat them the same way you would treat certain other fast units. You have to be more considered with them, you have to know what you're going to do in advance. You can't just on a whim decide to hop up, move 10 inches, turn round again, multiple pivots. You have to plan in advance which way you need to be facing. So I took some pictures of the armies that were out on display at lunchtime on day 1, and here they are. So I think this one won one of the top 3 best army awards. Not that I could tell you what it is, but it's obviously very nice. And there's mine. Obviously everyone's favourite army, but sadly did not win the Best Army Award, even though there were 3 to be had. Here are some very nice abyssals. These are salamanders by the looks of it. Got some orcs, and I really like these. I like this boat with orcs on it. That's very nice. I think that got one of my votes. Very nice theme, very nice old school classic giant as well. Abyssal dwarves with double Hellfane. Always fun to see that. I think these are Trident Realms with Nature allies, or Nature with Trident Realms allies, one or the other. Orcs, Rift Forged style. Sylvankin, I think that's not the army I just faced, this is a different one. I'm not 100% sure what this one is. Could this one be Sylvankin as well? Unknown. Got some nice undead here. Very spicy. I think I'm right in saying this one got one of the best painted awards as well. And we've got some Rordia. Not halflings, but Rordia. And I think this one also got an award. It's dog-themed. Dog-themed Rordia. There are some dwarves, it looks like there. And more dwarves here. So some very old school classic dwarves. Ironbreakers, full of those. Some even older ones. A full dwarf infantry list as well, which apparently is not very effective in the game. Which is sad because it should be. We've got some Kingdoms of Men, I think, here. And, oh, that's not a very good picture. That looks like Empire of Dust, though. And here we've got some undead by the looks of it. Ghostly looking. We've got some dwarves. I assume these are free dwarves, which is where you can take a lot of the Brock riders. So I think it's almost all Brocks. Very cool. And some Basileans. Some Northern Alliance, very icy. These are Abyssals. I'm going to guess Forces of Nature for this one. Because some of the armies share units, it's not always the easiest to tell which one's which. Got some Halflings here, which is an army I have faced before. And one of the armies was actually packed away into its tub and didn't bother being out on the table for voting purposes. So you can see there are some rats in there, so I just took a picture of the corner. Some goblins. Goblins are always fun, of course. More Nightstalkers. And next game. So, the next scenario is Loot, which is the one where there are 3 objectives along the centre and you have to hold onto them, pick them up and hold them on your unit at the end of the game. And I'm up against Halflings, so let's have a look at the list. Halfling Braves, a couple of units of those. Looks like there was a problem with the printer here. Some of the words aren't quite visible. But there are some Halflings. There are some other Halflings. There are some other Halflings. So I can tell you what some of the units are, though. So, 3 volley guns. There are the Aeronauts and the Edge Grenadiers. So the Aeronauts, I believe, are the planes. And they're slightly slower, but hit very hard. And the Grenadiers are the ones with balloons that are very fast, but don't hit as hard. So there's 4 units of each of those. And there's a lot of shooting, actually. Let's see. So these would be the Halfling. Are they rifles, perhaps? Yeah, there you go. Halfling rifles, 18 inches, piercing 1. So that's quite scary. And let's go through my setup. So on this flank, I've got 2 units of Soul Flayers and Shadow Hounds, which I think is more than a match for those 2 units of Grenadiers there. In the middle, I've got all the big meaty stuff. The Reapers obviously hiding, Mind Flayers obviously hiding, because we're up against some shooting here and some speed, and I don't want them to be hit by anything. Phantoms at the front, in front of the Butchers, and 2 more regiments of Soul Flayers over there, who are facing down this flank. So we've got a ranged unit there, another one there, and we've got one of each of the 2 flying units behind there. So this is the kind of list I worry about, because it's a gun line, so obviously you want to get towards it to fight it and beat it up, but if you get within range to do so, there's a lot of speed behind as well. So these Grenadiers, the speed 10 ones, there's 4 of those, so they can just charge out and get in your way. And then these ones, which I'm not going to be allowed to charge, the Aeronauts, because they're valuable and hard hitting, if they just sit behind, that means that whatever you attack with, there's a good chance they'll smoosh it. More shooting over on this side, on the other side of the volley guns, and more flyers. So that's basically the list. There are some individuals as well, one of them with a big rifle, and that's it. So on the left flank we've got one of the tokens, one in the middle, and then another one fairly close to it on the right. So the left one is out on its own, these 2 are quite close together, so that's why I've got my big concentration of units there between those 2 tokens, even though I'm marching straight towards the gun line. I can't be too worried about that because I've got stealthy and I've got lots of cover to work with, which should help. We'll see though. And then the flank, I've got these 3 units to contest that one, and I can hope to get into this flank with 2 flying units as well, and have a bit of a pincer movement, and hope that my opponent isn't able to counter it with his own flyers. I do have more speed 10 in my list, but my opponent also has more ability to shoot down my units. I've only got the lightning bolt, and wind blast is a bit short range. As soon as I use it with the Banshee, he's then out in the open, ripe to get killed. Turn 1. So I go, let's see, my opponent goes first and puts some wounds on scarecrows. I believe I won the roll-off and forced my opponent to go first. I think that's what happened, because I was thinking, if I go first and just move up there as fast as I can, I'm going to be within range of those guns, and I think they've got steady aim. So even if they don't though, and I get into range of them, they're still going to shoot me. So I might as well give my opponent 1 turn of really suboptimal shooting right at the start, because he's not going to come and immediately land on these objectives as soon as the game starts, because that would be suicidal with everything I've got staring at that area. So it's just going to waste a turn with not much shooting going on, is my thinking. And then if I'm going to get cut down on the way in with bullets, then it's going to be slightly less turns of that happening. So turn 1 for me, putting the pressure on with Soul Flayers and Shadow Hounds. So these ones are the fast ones, and my thinking is 2 of those, I don't think going in on their own they're hard hitting enough to kill the unit of Soul Flayers. They're certainly not guaranteed to do it in 1 round, so I'm just dangling this here. So they might think, do we take the risk and both bomb in there and try and kill that unit? Because if they don't, they're both toast, because I've got these 2 waiting. So it's kind of bait. Will they take it is the question. Over on this side, it's a mighty advance. Only the Phantoms are looking through the woods though, because then next turn I could potentially charge and block something maybe, while everyone else advances behind. Everyone else is just hiding though at this point, because they don't want to get shot to death. Soul Flayers staying out of range of the enemy flyers, but within range to charge the archers next turn, so causing a bit of threat, and making sure I've got cover behind this hill as well, because I can be seen because the Soul Flayers are so tall. So I'm just ensuring I've got cover on nearly all my units from shooting, because cover and stealthy is tough to get through, and there's a lot of cover on this board, as you can see. 2 very wide woods that I had to cover my advance, and this hill, very handy. And in fact, even these walls are quite useful for that. A bit of damage dealt with some of my lightning bolts, but not a lot. So in my opponent's turn, he decides not to take the bait and instead double charges the Shadowhounds. And assuming that the Shadowhounds are killed, that means that I've only got one unit to charge those two with, which is by no means guaranteed to kill one of them. Had the charge gone in on this unit and not much damage had been done, I could have double charged a Shadowhound unit and Soul Flayers into one of them and Soul Flayers single into the other, so one of them would be almost sure to die. In this instance, if the Hounds die, there's no guarantee that either one of those will die next turn. I think that is the better move. Turning round the Rifles to shoot, and what do they target? Well, they take out the Phantoms. So the Phantoms paid the price for poking their head out into the woods. And over here, 3 damage is done to the Soul Flayers from shooting, who can be seen over all this, but they do have cover and stealthy, which is why they don't take much damage. And then the Shadowhounds get wavered, which I think is not the worst outcome for either of us, really. Because, as I was saying, the only way I think I can guarantee taking out one of these in a turn is if I double charge with the Soul Flayers and the Hounds into one of them. So as it stands, I may just end up ignoring them for now, because they're there to chaff me up in the first place, and they're facing this way now against a wavered unit, so they're going to be occupied for one more turn at least, so I may just ignore them. Turn 2 for me. So Soul Flayers decide to get stuck into the Rifles, which in some ways is quite risky, because if I just stood off, they would shoot me down, but it would take some time. Charging in means that I'll either achieve something or I'll be killed sooner, because there are things like this lurking behind that can deal serious damage in combat more easily than they can from shooting. So I'll die quicker, but I'll actually achieve something while dying rather than just standing there. And I've put the other unit, told them to pick up the tokens and stare down here. So they can always drop it and charge off if need be, because that token might not be pivotal if the other two are in play. On this side, one unit of Soul Flayers charge into the small ranged unit that's here, the regiment, and kill it, and then turn in to face everything else to make sure they're in the front. And the other unit moves up onto the hill a bit. Everyone else gets into the woods, so they're all in charge range now. All these 3, I think, can potentially charge next turn. But obviously the archers aren't going to stay in that exact spot, they'll probably move. And I think a slight mistake is that I've put the Soul Flayers in charge range of 2 Grenadier units with no one looking at them, meaning that anything that charges into them can't be attacked by other units of mine. But I think both of our armies are feeling the effects of this. We've got so much speed, so many flying units at speed 10, then you can't turn exactly the way you would want to. You can't align your units the way you want, because there's always a threat from multiple different angles. So keeping a solid line across the front is just the safest thing to do generally. Because even these units aren't as fast, but there's still a threat coming in this direction, so at some point I'll have to be wary of those and turning flanks to them. But if you look at that unit, its charge is going to take it to about here, so that's going to limit what things can do for like a third of the battlefield. And on this side I've got the Soul Flayers here that are staring down, but obviously, as I said, possibly a mistake putting them in charge range of these 2. Just gives people a lot to think about, and I've noticed that while playing this list with lots of these really dangerous flyers at different angles, my opponents are spending a lot of time on the clock, angling and measuring and making sure they're not offering flanks. So here you can see that the aeronauts charge into the back unit of Soul Flayers. Double Grenadiers on the Hounds. Double Grenadiers on the Soul Flayers on the hill. Aeronauts and Rifles into the regiment that took out the small ranged unit. And Rifles and Aeronauts into this one. So because they were in kind of a castle formation, it's kind of difficult to avoid some of this, unless you push forward in one big solid line and angle yourself specifically to prevent double charges. But I felt like I kind of had to spread out and try and look for some openings on the flanks, because otherwise I was just marching to my death, was my feeling, because my centre units aren't fast enough to get there that quickly. And when you look at scarecrows, in difficult terrain, so they have cover. I suppose if I'd manoeuvred around the difficult terrain, they'd still be slow because I'd be turning each turn. So yeah, I think all this cover is good in some ways, but it also means that I'm slower while going through it. This one on the right flank gets wavered, which again, it's not necessarily the worst because it's tying up 2 flying units that would turn around and start looking in really dangerous directions. Still some human hands there. This unit is killed. You can see these 2 units are still alive at this stage, but that one's now dead. The hounds take some damage, but get double wand, which is quite comical. And these ones take 5 damage from the aeronauts there. So hounds are still alive, so they're going to be able to inflict some pain. I've still got this big solid block of meat, but I'm walking towards a big solid block of guns. You can see I've plinked a bit of damage onto some of the volley guns with some of my ranged attacks, some of my lightning bolts. I've got my horror up here. I think the Banshee has actually been gunned down at this point. Is that correct? Or am I still hiding it? Let me see. I don't see it anywhere. I think it was on the hill, was it, before? Let me go back and check, because I haven't talked about it. Where is that Banshee? There's the Banshee. So I think it does get gunned down from this position, because it popped out to do some damaging wind blast onto the volley guns, but got itself killed, which was always likely to happen the instant it popped out anyway. And its potential is limited in a scenario like this, where you pick up tokens, because you can't wind blast a unit that's carrying a token. So that does take the edge off the Banshee's power there slightly. So on to turn 3 for me, and a counter charge here. So these 2 units have done 5 wounds on each other so far. A couple of wounds from the hounds, but really they're just being annoying because they're going to die next turn anyway. In the centre, I'm pushing my units into the woods as far as they can go without being in too much peril. And some aeronauts have taken a wound there by the looks of it. Is that even a wound? I'm not sure if that's even marking a wound. That could be something else. So I've got my Shadow Hulk, which is actually here, but it was falling over, and the butchers into that rifle horde. Only 12 wounds there, which is really disappointing. But it's not that wild, because the Shadow Hulk doesn't have a lot of attacks, and the butchers only hit on 4s, so occasionally you will have a low round of attacks for those 2. Not like the Reapers, where you're almost guaranteed to shred things. So, how's it looking at the end of turn 3? Well, I still haven't got anything near this gun battery. And it's looking more and more like I'm just going to have to ignore it. Because I don't really have the forces left to commit anything to going over there and trying to murder those. Turn 4. So, aeronauts into the flank of the scarecrows. And it's one of those things, what are you going to do? Because if you turn to face that one, this one suddenly is in the flank. I don't think it was possible to get them both in the front in this position. And just going to have to accept that. If you're being out-fought and suddenly there are units on both sides of you that are fast and powerful, you've got to face one of them if you can't angle yourself sufficiently to cover both eventualities. You've got a double charge from aeronauts and the rifles into the butchers because they failed to kill the unit and this is their punishment. Other aeronauts into the Shadow Hulk. One unit of grenadiers jumps over the soul flayers and the other one is going to attack them. And I'm not too disappointed about that, because the Soul Flayers are more likely to survive this turn with only one unit attacking them. As far as tokens, I'm still holding one of them. There's one on the Scarecrows there as well, actually, which they picked up last time. And there's another one there. So I'm winning at the moment. The Horror gets wavered by some shooting, which is nice. Double one, which isn't a true double one on the Soul Flayers, but I always like to take a picture of any double one in action anyway. So it will obviously a slightly higher result than that still wouldn't have got rid of them. But they're alive and ready to strike back again. And they roll a 3 on the dogs, but that's still enough to kill them. So I just thought it'd be funny to take a picture of that, just to the comically low nerve rolls consecutively, but one of them didn't even matter. It was still enough. Scarecrows are dead. Look at that. They only took 12 wounds, but then 10 was rolled on the dice, so they're dead. There's no inspiring nearby, and they're gone. Butchers get wavered, which is the dream, because they've got Fury, so they can just charge back into either of these units. Shadow Hulk takes a fair bit as well, but doesn't die. These guys don't die either. So that wasn't a particularly bad round for me. Lost a couple of things, but nothing majorly important. So, scenario terms, this unit has just stolen the token from the Scarecrows. So we're holding one each, and there's one right there that the Reapers can easily get if they want to. So the fact that Butchers are wavered means that these Reapers can probably go after that unit. Turn 4. So I managed to get them up to 9 now with my Soul Flayers. Both units on 9, so if we keep going at this rate, my unit will die first, which is unfortunate. And you can see there's been a bit of damage done to these units from my various shootings. Okay, so where were we? Okay, here. So, interesting moment. The aeronauts, let's see, where were they positioned? Here. So, they are a big threat. They can see the flanks of various units. If I charge the Reapers in there, I don't want to be staring in this direction with them. Even if I'm just moving over there, I don't want to be staring in this direction. So I decide the best thing to do, instead of trying to shoot the aeronauts off and get lucky with the lightning bolt, is just charge in both Mind Screeches so that their vision is blocked, and I might do some damage to them. And they can only attack one at a time, so occasionally Mind Screeches charging in isn't the worst idea, especially if someone offers them a flank or a rear. They do have a decent number of attacks. They're not terrible at fighting. It's just they lack the crushing strength, really. So both of them going in there. The Reapers obviously reap and completely destroy that unit and steal that, or they pick up that token, should I say, that was on the ground here. The Butchers kill the other unit, which was in front of them. And the Shadow Hulk fails to kill this unit here, though, with its slightly low number of attacks. And the Soul Flayers fail to flay that unit. So there is danger, but we've got this bit of danger blocked off for the moment. Turn 5 for the Halflings. So these guys are going to go back into one of the Mind Screeches because they can't see anything else. And we've got a bit of a Grenadier hug going on the Soul Flayers there. Aeronauts back into the Shadow Hulk. Now if that Shadow Hulk had killed those Aeronauts, there would be quite a different complexion on this flank, because as it stands, it's probably about to die. That's going to be significant. The Reapers carrying the token get wavered by some shooting, and on 5 wounds, dead is the Horror, I believe. So the Horror's dead. Shadow Hulk is now dead. Soul Flayers are now dead. One of the Mind Screeches is wavered, which is good, because it wasn't going to be able to do its spells anyway. And the Soul Flayers over here are dead, so that is a very devastating turn for my chances. But scenario-wise, it's still not the worst. My opponent is holding 2 tokens, one here. And let me just check, they actually have one. think they do. Yeah, they've got one there. There's another one over on one of these units after the kill, and my Reapers hold the other one. So I'm losing at the moment. But this unit is definitely in a killable position for me. So the fact that the Shadow Hulk failed, here are the reasons why it's bad. Obviously, because the Shadow Hulk is now dead. Secondly, it meant that the Butchers couldn't turn away from that area. Because as it was, the Shadow Hulk was alive. It was blocking the view of the Grenadiers to the Butchers, so they could have turned round and looked in that direction quite happily. But alas, they have to be facing this way to deal with the menace. Well, what do you know? A single Mind Screech. So it decided to... I think I lightning bolted, did I? Or did I just go in and fight it again with 5 attacks? I don't remember, but either way, they're dead and they drop their token. So I think they actually dropped it... They may have dropped it previously, in fact, under their body. Under the unit, because he felt they were about to die. I think that is the case. The Reapers just reposition themselves to face the menace coming from the hill. The Butchers kill the Aeronauts, which the Shadow Hulk failed to kill earlier. So scenario-wise, it's not looking too bad. Things getting killed-wise, it's looking really bad. Turn 6. Butchers get charged, the other unit of Grenadiers move away. Mind Screech. One of them is dead. So, my opponent really wanted to kill both Mind Screeches here, because as it stands I can just pick up that objective. And over here the Reapers were killed and forced to drop their token. The Butchers then killed as well, so I'm left with a Mind Screech, and if it ends here, yep, just getting my bearings here. So, if there's no turn 7, the game just ends. And that's it. I don't have any tokens. I've just got a Mind Screech. But we do get a turn 7, which means the Mind Screech pops onto the objective and picks it up. Is that even right? Okay, I've confused myself here by putting this dice next to the number 6. We do not get a turn 7. So on my turn 6, the Mind Screech leaps onto the token and picks it up. And at that point, we do not get a turn 7. That's there to show you what the roll was for the end of turn 6. So that's why I was confused for a minute there, because normally I put a dice next to the turn 6 counter to show that we're on to 6 plus 1. But here, that's just to show you what the roll was. So the Mind Screech leapt onto the objective on my turn 6, knowing if there was a turn 7 it would get gunned down into oblivion by those, by that, or it could have even been charged by that unit. Let's face it, it would have been shot, and the Grenadiers would have just flown over here and picked up the token off the ground there. So it would have been an instant loss for me had it gone to turn 7, regardless of what happened to the Mind Screech. But I've only got one model left, managed to get a draw out of it. Fairly happy with that outcome under the circumstances. There are a couple of things that obviously didn't go my way that were slightly knife edge-ish. There wasn't anything totally ridiculous that happened. There wasn't a unit that was just killed in really bizarre circumstances where it 100% should have lived but it somehow died. It was just a few things were slightly against me in a couple of key areas. So, for example, on this flank, the Shadow Hulk, I think it didn't do very well with its attacks for the whole game. So there was the attacks on the Horde that was there that took them an extra turn to kill because of that, and then also the Shadow Hulk failed to kill the Aeronauts. So Shadow Hulk underperformed a bit on that side. On this side, I think I had a decent idea, but it wasn't necessarily executed the best. I could have kept things out of range of certain other units and baited a bit better and not given the option of avoiding the bait. So it wasn't just bad luck that landed me in that situation. However, Mind Screech saves the day, we've got a draw. On to the next round. Ratkin Slaves. Now, I'd heard about this list beforehand. This is a list of rats that explode. So, lots of these units, when you kill them, they blow up and do, I think it's 2d3. Is it piercing 2 maybe? So a decent amount of damage when you kill them. They also have the ability for one of the units here to make one of the Ratkin units just go away, to get it out of the way, which is interesting. So we've got slave warriors, regiment, 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 and they all have the last breath, which is them exploding. 2 death engine impalers, which are a bit of a fighty monster. An overmaster, some inspiring, and a vicious on it as well, so it's not the worst fighter. Bolek's skin flayer, which is a hero on a chariot with rallying to slaves, so keeping the slaves alive until they blow up. Kreiser's gore impaler, which is a monster, which is, I think it's a bit like the death engine impalers except better. Overmaster on Ancient Winged Half-Breed, which I know about from my using it with the Abyssal Dwarves. I don't think it's that optimal, but it's decent. It just doesn't have a lot of attacks. And a formation with horde of slave warriors and some regiments. And I think that does it grant rallying to a taskmaster on a chariot? I think that's what it does. So we are playing Fool's Gold, I think. So it's the one where you have an objective worth 2 points, 2 objectives worth 1 point, 2 objectives worth 0 points each, and you place them on your opponent's half of the table, so you only find out what they are at the end of the 3rd turn. And you can see that all the objectives are out here. I've deployed all the way across the table. The objectives are very well spread out. My opponent has gone mostly for this big ball of rat death in the middle, surrounding the impalers, lots of the exploding rats, a small amount of exploding rats on that flank, and more on that side. So what it suggests is that my opponent has not put anything on this side that he cares about, because there's only one small unit of rats there. I believe I've put a bit of an all-over-the-place mixture of tokens rather than concentrating them in one area. So I think I've got a 1 in this corner. I think the 2 should be there. But usually after putting them down I forget which one's which anyway. So I'm not the biggest fan of this scenario. And I can't even remember where the zeros are now. But you'll see. So I've got... I'm not too worried about speed, because let's have a look here. We've got lots of speed 6. The impalers are speed 8. There is, I think there is there some facility for wild charge in here? I'm not 100% sure, but either way I've got the speed edge. So I'm spreading out. I'm not too worried about shooting in this one. Is there actually any shooting at all? Don't think there really is. So that's why I'm not completely covering my units. Just a long line, mostly, apart from the Reapers, because I don't want them getting charged. And there's the Overmaster on Ancient Winged Half-Breed and some slaves. There's the Impalers and some slaves, and there's some slaves. You can see where all the tokens are, just all over the place. They'll be more relevant after turn 3 when we can actually see which ones are worth anything. So turn 1, my opponent is going first and pushes up, keeping this thing safe, obviously, behind some rats. I mean, it's not entirely safe, I can still shoot it or wind blast it. But it's safe, because it's not going to be charged. You don't want to get double charged by soul flayers, because it could actually be in danger under those circumstances. It might not, but it's not what you want. This big wall of death just moves up together in a block. And because of that central block, I'm very confident that I'm going to be able to get some serious flank supremacy on this side with my 2 units of soul flayers. Because I've got the dogs, so this unit should die. Unless I'm really foolish and manage to get the dogs and the soul flayers killed here somehow. But I'm very confident. My hard-hitting stuff in the middle. I'm going to try and shoot off the slaves where possible. I'm going to try and hit the slaves, and then pray sometimes that I don't kill them in one hit, because then I can finish them off with shooting so they don't explode on me. And if I'm going to hit them, I'm going to hit them with one unit at a time so that I don't get multiple explosions on me, unless I really have to. If it's on a horde, maybe I'd throw 2 units in. Turn 1 for me. So, phantoms, these are the things I'm worried about in combat. So, they go in to the centre one, just so they're blocking up all 3 slightly. Everything else is moving up. This base is representing the Shadow Hulk because it wouldn't stand on the edge of this hill very well. Phantom is staying a little bit back and then just wind blasting through the gap. 1 damage done to that, and some slight damage done from the wind blast and various lightning bolts, so just plinking damage on at this stage. And the dogs charge into them, and the soul flayers just behind. So if the dogs did well, the soul flayers would be positioned to immediately look for the flank. This unit is waiting for the rats to come in so that something will open up here. And these 2 are scared of him. You can see he's been wind blasted back a bit. Got a Mind Screech there. 2 units of soul flayers. So pushing him back. He probably doesn't want to just go in on his own and attack the Mind Screech, for example, because there's always a chance to get flanked by these soul flayers. So he probably wants the support of these rats. But overall, I think this thing is kind of wasted here, in some ways. In some ways not, because it's acting as a deterrent, so I'm not just immediately moving up and looking into the flank. But I can't really do that anyway with all these rat units. I could, however, immediately charge the rats and not be overly concerned. One thing with them exploding, if I can mop up with one of my units, send it around mopping up multiple units of slaves, because you don't take a nerve check when you take this damage from them exploding. So as long as I don't take damage on my opponent's turn, if I just have 1 unit that goes around mopping things up and just accumulating damage on itself, as long as I don't then take too much and become devastated, then it could be a pretty decent roll if I can get something that can just scoop up multiple rat regiments. But once they've taken the explosion damage, you then can't afford that unit to be charged, because they're very likely to be killed. They've only got defense 4, 13, 15, the soul flayers. Turn 2. So the rats, they go in, double charge with lots of slaves onto the scarecrows. These 3 are all teaming up on the phantoms. And really the phantom's just there to cover my approach. The dogs get wavered on 1 wound from the slaves who they didn't kill last time, which is kind of annoying. But the fact they only take 1 wound means that I don't necessarily need to give them any support, because they're alive. In my opponent's next turn, the dogs are only on 1 damage, so it's unlikely that they're going to die immediately, based on that performance anyway. If that's repeated, they probably won't get wavered again. It was fairly lucky to waver them, so I may just move the soul flayers away and ignore this unit. 1 unit of rats is able to get to the butchers and do 2 damage. Scarecrows take 12. And I think those are nerve rolls. So very close to getting rid of the scarecrows, actually. The phantoms do get killed. Look at all that damage. And this thing overruns and stops just short of the scarecrows. So that's how the battle line is looking. The fact that the rats have gone in and I've got these units on the flanks means that eventually there are going to be flanks opening, but at the moment it's a very solid block and there aren't a huge amount of juicy ones available to me. There are some, but it's not always worth taking on a flank if it's going to leave one of your valuable units in harm's way. You can see here that in a very amateurish move, we put the chess clock on this side and then deployed loads of units down there, so the chess clock has to move into the middle of the battlefield. Very, very low-level gaming there. We should have put it on that side where there are less units, but we didn't know that when we started deploying. And you can't just move the clock to the other side because then the button's on the wrong side unless you have the numbers facing away from you, which is also a nightmare. So, turn 2 for me. Now, this unit... Okay, let's wind back a bit and I'll show you what was going on there. So, this unit is within charge range of that unit, which means they charge them and eat them. So based on the position of this unit here, I think they may have actually come closer after I took that earlier picture. I don't think I took a picture of that flank again, so that's why you didn't see it. But I think they come down to about here. But I just never photographed that flank during the turn because nothing happened over there. So this unit gets into them, kills them, and then takes some damage from exploding, but they're safe from everything. That's the only way they could get that far, kill something, and then the fact that they've then killed in combat means they get that free pivot, which makes up for them not being nimble. So, a really good position for these Soul Flayers. These ones are staying back out of charge range, because I can be a bit patient here now, because I've got the positioning advantage. The Mind Screech is just hiding from the Overmaster. Other Mind Screech is coming up, so I can do cheeky lightning bolting over there. So I like this position here. Because if they don't turn around to deal with this threat, it means moving down here, which is kind of out of the action. I don't know how much that objective's worth yet, though. There's another one here, another objective. So if these ones are really valuable, maybe that's fine, because I don't know how much they're worth. So sending units down here out of the arc of all my units is really the only safe spot for them, which means a 300-point unit that's going to be just out the game for a while in that case. The Scarecrows actually kill the regiment there, regiment of slaves, and then they explode and do some more damage. The Shadow Hulk and the Reapers decide to double charge the Horde and do 27 wounds, and then I double one them. And as soon as it happened, I thought, you know what? That isn't actually a bad idea. Because I'm not going to get exploded on now. And then I'll be able to finish them off with shooting later. Or so I thought. I'll tell you my flaw with that plan shortly. So, into my opponent's turn, and he uses the ability to just get rid of a unit, and they do explode anyway, apparently, onto whoever is touching them. So they do take some damage. So they exploded anyway. So the double one was kind of ignored because my opponent chose to get rid of them to free up this space so other units could get through. Which then allows a triple charge into the Reapers, who do not like that one bit. Double charge here with the big machines into the Scarecrows. And over here, these units, the Slaves and the Overmaster, go into the only safe space they can where they can't be charged by Soul Flayers. But there aren't enough pivots to turn round afterwards because of the distance required to get there out of my sight. And the other unit of Slaves comes down here. So, this gives me a bit of license now. I can have a turn of not worrying about this guy too much. Over on this flank, Shadowhounds get wavered again after taking more damage. And this double charge into the Butchers does not yield success. So I'm now able to get my Banshee behind enemy lines shortly. Scarecrows are dead, of course. And on my next turn, looking at this, I've now got flanks available because I've got a unit here that decided to ignore this fight. I've got a unit here, so these two can potentially join in with the fight. I've got a unit down there that could potentially go in there, because I think all these units are perfectly aligned, all these big monsters and the chariot. So I don't think I can get any flanks on any of them because none of them are at an angle. The Shadow Hulk is actually where that base is there. So this unit of Soul Flayers are going to be able to flank this chariot. There's a bit poking out the back there, the Banshee will have to get out of the way. And that's precisely what happens, so that's dead. The Butchers go into the flank of... I don't know, the Butchers just go into the front of... Do they go into the front of the chariot as well? I think they do, because I shoot off the slaves. I think they were so dead already. So this is one instance of me cheating with the Banshee and using the Wind Blast on two units that are far apart, because I finished off the unit there, and I also pushed this unit to do more damage to them. And here, they've been pushed dead, ignoring what's going on over here for now, and these Soul Flayers kill some rats and then get exploded on. So it's looking quite good. I've got this encircle motion going on here. I've got all my Soul Flayers alive, which is a bonus. And that thing, the big dangerous enemy unit, is facing the wrong way, so can't do anything to me next turn. Turn 4, and some rats, and the Overmaster charge into the Mind Screecher. Okay, so these have got wild charge, I think. And I moved back as far as I could with these soul flayers to get away from them, but one of them managed to roll high enough to successfully charge into the soul flayers. The others did not. So they had a dilemma. Because if you look at this, they've got soul flayers pointing in both directions. Whichever way they turn, they're in trouble. They decide the best thing to do is to just allow one unit to be flanked only and not multiple. So I don't know if it was possible, but sometimes you can kind of get two units butt to butt facing in different directions, like completely back to back. I don't know if that was possible here. So in the end they just end up in this situation. So there are going to be flanks available to me. You can see there's a flank on the Shadow Hulk there. So we'll see if that actually gets killed. The big guy is now in a dangerous position, staring behind my lines, so I'm going to have to worry about him from now on. Shadow Hulk takes a bit of damage, but not a lot, so this unit of slaves is now exposed in the flank. Mind Screech takes some wounds, and I don't want to lose my shooting ability because it means I'm going to have to fight slaves in combat, which is obviously bad. These Soul Flayers get wavered, which is kind of acceptable because it stops this thing turning round for a turn. Turn 4 for me. Mind Screech goes back into the slaves. Don't think it got wavered. The two Soul Flare units double team this thing. I think they both had flanks on it on this one. I think this is the big scary one, the most powerful one. I decided to double it and kill it on that basis, just to make absolutely sure. The Shadow Hounds run away. So they're just, there's an objective here that the Shadow Hounds would like to find out if it's worth anything. And they're able to ignore those rats on... Yeah, because I think I wavered them with the Wind Blast previously. So they were stuck where they were, so the dogs are able to escape from them this turn. So I'm not worried about them. I've got loads of stuff left. I'm looking in a really healthy position at the moment. I've got the enemy encircled with lots of speed. Looking good. Next turn, this chariot decides that it's going to go and threaten those dogs instead of anything else, because there's an objective there which could be worth something. The Overmaster goes after the Horror and can potentially overrun into the Mind Screech. The Impaler goes after the Shadow Hulk, which is actually facing it now, and does some wounds, but not enough. Soul Flares on my board edge are dead now at the second attempt. The Mind Screech takes some more wounds. The Horror is killed. The Overrun, and then the Mind Screech is also killed. Whatever was here is killed. Can't remember what that was. What was in that position? Where is he? Was it this unit of Soul Flayers? Yep, that unit of Soul Flayers gets killed. Looks like this guy delivered the finishing blow, because I think that unit was damaged. So, lost a couple of units of Soul Flayers down to 2. Still looking quite healthy, but we don't know how much the objectives are worth. Wait a minute. Yes, we do. Okay, yeah, I've gone too far. So I'll just tell you how much they're worth now. Okay, do we have a wide shot with the numbers on further back? I was just blitzing through the turns, and they didn't tell you how much they were worth. Okay, so this is on... This is the flank here. This is my right flank. There's a 1 point there, a 2 point there, a 1 point there, a 1 point there, and a 1 point there. So this flank is very valuable, which is why my opponent had the Overmaster. And then, let's see if we have a picture of the other flank. There's a 1 there, which is that one. There is a 1 there. And I think that's all of them. Is that right? Are there... Yeah, there are 6 scoring objectives. So we've taken away all the zeros, which were mostly over on this side. So there's a 2 there, 1 there, 2 there, 1 there, there, and there. But this side, very valuable. This little area here is valuable, but not as much as this side. So most of my stuff is surrounding this area, surrounding this 1 point objective, so I need to get things over there to score. Okay, moving on. As we're getting closer to the end, there's less time to reach that stuff. And you can see these slaves are sitting pretty on this one. So, in my turn 5, I managed to kill off the Impaler that was fighting the Shadow Hulk. I send a Mind Screech over here onto the 2-point objective. And my Soul Flayers jump over the top of the Overmaster, because that means they're going to be able to get to an objective. And also, if those slaves charge them in the rear, I'm not overly concerned because they're slaves and they're going to be hindered anyway. This Impaler and the Overmaster on foot go after my Soul Flayers. And this Overmaster on the Ancient Winged Half-Breed jumps up onto the hill to claim that objective. The rats go in there, but they're not going to do much. 5 wounds. Soul Flayers there are dead. Butchers are still alive, looking in that direction to threaten this thing that's jumped onto the objective. Because I moved the dogs sideways to prevent them from being killed by this chariot. So I'm going to need them alive. That's a 2-point objective. It's really valuable. So that is not the end of the game. Did I just not take any pictures at the end? Okay, so what actually happens at the end? So at this point, I'm holding 2 and 1. And my opponent is holding 1, 1 and 2. So at this point of the game, I'm actually losing, but there are more turns. I think we're maybe just rushed at this point. Okay, yeah, I remember, because this is the end of day 1, and I was about to be picked up outside to go home, or to where I was staying. So I was in a rush there. So I didn't take pictures at the end of the game. So I'll just explain it to you. So in the next turn, the butchers charge into this chariot, which brings them to within 3 inches of it anyway. The dogs, because they're nimble, pivot and turn and move sideways to get within 3 inches of it. The Mind Screech, I think, stays here. And I think the Soul Flayers move up there as well, just to double up on that objective, I believe. So I was definitely in a position to win from that point, with the Shadow Hulk chilling on this one. So I was then on a 2, a 1, and a 2, putting me on 5 and my opponent on just these 2. And then the game ended before turn 7. I don't think we got a turn 7. So I ended up with the win. Didn't get a chance to kill everything in the end, but can't complain about that. On to day 2. So 2 wins and a draw so far. Enjoying playing this list. It's much more speedy and dynamic than the kind of lists I usually take. More Sylvankin. So Bladestalkers, couple of units. Hordes of Forest Shamblers. Troops of Silverbreeze Cavalry, which are the ranged version. Stormwind Cavalry, which are the fighty version. And they have a Nimble and increased Nerve and Pathfinder with the upgrade. Greater Air Elemental, which isn't going to catch me out this time because I know that it's Nimble. Master Hunter, who is a nice little shooty guy. 2 Tree Herders, one of them the Wiltfather again, and an Archmage with the Scrying Gem to make me set up some units at the start. Banechant and Lightning Bolt. And the scenario is push. So their bases representing where these trees are supposed to be, because they won't go that close together because they're so big and pokey. But there are 2 tokens on the Wiltfather, and I've put my 2 tokens on the Scarecrows in the centre. Obviously you don't know where the tokens are going until after deployment, so I've got quite a spread, but it's all fast stuff on the flanks. My opponent does have some speed, but it's mostly the Air Elemental, which can't go at the double, and the Silverbreeze Cavalry, which don't want to be fighting really anyway. The Stormwind Cavalry are fast, but not as fast as my speed 10 stuff. So I'm going to try and do a similar thing to the last game, try and get a bit of a pincer movement with my fast units. Even if I can only do it on one flank, I'm still causing some serious trouble, and I've got my big block of death in the middle here with the Reapers, the Butchers, Shadow Hulk. So I think I go first, with it being... this is after the scout moves, by the way. I think I go first, and obviously with push you want to be going forwards, so going first you'd think is a good idea. These guys move up into the terrain to get cover from shooting, I think. Everyone else just moves up behind the scarecrows. And not a huge advance because I don't want to get charged yet. And I do some wind blasting and push the cavalry backwards. They're the main threat. And turn 1 for my opponent, you can see it's a sporadic advance. There's a lot of things to consider because I've got a very wide front line with lots of speed, so you've got to get your angles right. So this unit of cavalry decide to go after the Shadow Hounds, who I'd left in range. Which is kind of obvious bait, but just because it's bait doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't do it. It still might be the right move. The Soul Flayers are very happy that this is going on, though. I'm not going to be able to double charge because there's no space, but the Soul Flayers can jump over that unit. And what I would like to do is charge the Soul Flayers into an individual, kill it, overrun into a second individual, kill that, and then to stop this cavalry from making me pay for that, I would like to move the Banshee up there, who is down here, and push them back so they can't then charge it, can't then charge the unit. That would be very nice. Turn 2. So I do manage to kill one of the individuals. I decide not to overrun because my Wind Blast didn't push the Stormwind cavalry back. It's not. Is it Stormwind or Silver Breeze? I get the two mixed up. The fighty ones. I don't push them far enough. So I had to just kill one and then pivot because I couldn't risk being in position to get absolutely murdered by them. And them not risking anything, because if I'm just facing straight forwards, I can either get flanked down there, or even if I'm not giving up the flank, they're still looking at my army. As it is, if they charge me, the risk is that they're exposing their flank to my other units down here, where I have got another unit of the Soul Flayers right there, who can see over in that direction. In the centre, Chaff Cavalry, instead of staying back shooting, they decide they're going to charge the Scarecrows, just to chaff up my advance. And then there's lots of shooting taking place. See, some damage has been done to these Soul Flayers, but not much. And you can see already it's looking like a serious pincer with all these Soul Flayers. Now, when they drop to speed 8 in a few weeks, you can still kind of do this. You just have to be closer, which is obviously riskier, and you can't stay out of range of things like this as easily. So it is going to be a hit for them. People are going to have to modify their strategies if this is something they can often get away with. So the archers and the cavalry decide to double charge into the Soul Flayers on the hill, which I would expect to kill them with the archers helping out. And it's probably a good idea as well, joining in with the archers, because they might lend an extra couple of wounds, which could be just enough to kill the unit, which then means that this unit is less likely to be exposing its flank to me. And yes, that was on my turn that the Scarecrows then charged back in and did 4 damage there. I just didn't mention when they actually charged, I think. Let's see. Yeah, there they are. Not doing much. So, you can see the Air Elemental also gone into the Butchers, triple charge into the Scarecrows, and the Wilt's Father picks up the centre objective. So, interesting thing about this push scenario at this tournament is that the centre objective is worth 2 wherever you have it on the battlefield, not just in your opponent's half. That's the only one that's worth double, even if you only have it in your own half, which I thought was an interesting twist. We'll see if it affects the outcome. So the Air Elemental is here. Lots of arcs being measured to make sure flanks aren't being exposed. My Shadowhounds get wavered in this duel of chaff. Soul Flayers on that hill are dead, but they did kill one individual first. Scarecrows are dead, take a zillion wounds. Butchers take 4 damage from the Elemental, which is fine. So I've got targets now. I could charge in. This unit of Forest Shamblers had to give up a flank to somebody, and they choose to give it to the Reapers. Because this unit was wavered, which meant that they were not involved in the combat, so they couldn't overrun. Because if they could overrun, obviously you would just overrun them forward to box in the Reapers, but they couldn't. So the Forest Shamblers have to give up a flank to somebody to get the Scarecrows dead. And they choose the Reapers. So these guys, what are they going to do? Well, one of them is obviously going to take the flank on the Air Elemental. So this unit of Soul Flayers down here go after the cavalry on the hill. 6 wounds. And I looked at it and thought, you know what, they're already taking serious damage. They've taken 6 wounds. Next thing that hits them, they could die anyway, so I might as well do some good with them first and not just let them get shot down fruitlessly. The Shadow Hulk charges into the Shamblers on the right. The other Shamblers just get annihilated. In fact, both those units get annihilated. Because the cavalry, I think... What did I do about them? I may have just killed off the... Yeah, killed the Elemental with 2 of these units. Killed the Shamblers with the flank charge from the Reapers. And the cavalry, who have also disappeared, I believe I shot to death with Lightning Bolt. So it's looking healthy, and the Wiltfather is looking in that direction, by the way, so I'm not bothered about these Soul Flayers. They're very safe. Turn 3. And we've got... Oh, you can see that these tokens here were dropped and picked up by them. Let's see. Yeah, so this, when the Scarecrows were killed, they were taken by this unit of Shamblers. And the Wiltfather has all the rest. He has the double token as well from the centre. There's a lot of angling and measuring going on, so it takes quite a while because there's so many threats from different angles now, because it's going very well for me, fighting-wise. The Shadowhounds are killed over on that flank ultimately by the cavalry, who are now freed up. The archers and the cavalry combine to take out another Soul Layer regiment, which is okay because it keeps the cavalry up there for a bit longer, and I've always got Wind Blast as well to push them away, to keep them out of the action while I'm mopping up in the centre. Shadow Hulk takes some more wounds. And it's looking good though. There are flanks available still, because if you don't kill something and there's all this looking at your flank, it's not going to go well. So, the cavalry get shot off, I think. Shoot them off with Lightning Bolt. Charge into the flanks of everything under the sun that's here. So it's Shamblers, and there's these guys as well. I think they get killed with a front charge. So the Soul Flare is mopping up. The Shadow Hulk does its thing as well. So there's, I think it's just the Wiltfather and the other Tree Herder in the middle there. That's representing its base because it wouldn't stand there. So it's just these two in the middle for my opponent, an individual, and those units. So it's going well, but obviously it's push, so it's about the tokens. And there's a token right there, and the Wiltfather is holding lots of the other tokens. So I don't know if I'm holding any at the moment. Turn 4, and we've got a lovely upside down picture showing precisely what's going on. The Wiltfather is hiding, and yeah, hiding behind this cavalry unit because it's just going to run away, because that's the only way my opponent has a chance at this stage, just to hide the Wiltfather. But what he eventually decides to do is actually charge the Banshee rather than just walking behind, because then if he kills it, he can turn around for free and doesn't have to worry about facing his rear to my army. And some shooting damage onto the Reapers. And the Shadow Hulk is down, but I've got all these units chasing down. However, I don't have a vast amount of time left, so it's going to be turn 5, so I've got maybe 2 turns to steal the tokens off this Wiltfather, and I've got to break through these 2 units as well, so the Reapers will get through that thing. I can send Soul Flayers into this unit, but what I decide to do is send 1 unit of Soul Flayers to finish off those archers, because that way I can land on the hill and face this way, which gives me a multi-angle threat against the Wiltfather, which I might need to finish it off later rather than everything coming from the same direction against that big defense. I think it's defense 6. Absolute beast. Turn 5. So, precisely what I described. Managed to kill everything apart from this hero and the Wiltfather. I'm now looking at it from multiple angles. So I'll try to pick the optimum approach here, because the unit I killed there I stole tokens from as well, I think. So, the Reapers are holding tokens. So the reason for this is the Reapers can be charged and they can have the tokens stolen, I'm aware of that. But the Reapers are closer to the opponent's half than the Butchers are. So the Wiltfather chooses to charge the Reapers, is not getting in my half with the tokens, which means that they're not going to be worth as much. So if I can then steal them off him, they'll be worth a large amount. I don't think he's going to charge the Butchers, because you either then turn round and get charged by the Reapers and don't have the tokens, which is obviously bad, or you then overrun through them to get the tokens that he does have into my half and therefore worth more, and then get recharged by Reapers. So the Butchers are not a good choice, in my opinion. You charge the Soul Flayers, you're not stealing any tokens, and then the Butchers can get you. And all the tokens are in my opponent's half at that point. So the Reapers are the choice he's going to go with. So there we go, gets in there. And this Spellcaster is going to try and do something as well. So this is how the Wiltfather is positioned after combat, carrying every single token after stealing them from the Reapers. And I've maybe got one turn to kill this Wiltfather. Got Soul Flayers in its flank, Butchers in its front. Do you think that's going to be enough to kill it? I've also got Bane Chant available here, which I'm obviously going to cast onto the Soul Flayers. Turn 6, and that's exactly what happens. Down they come into the flank, and Butchers in there into the front, and they murder it and steal all the tokens. Turn 6 for my opponent. Doesn't manage to accomplish much, and there you go. So killed almost everything, just that mage left. Very, very good illustration of the strengths of having a lot of speed and mobility in your army. If you're able to get in those positions that I found myself in there, where my opponent was constantly having to pivot and measure angles and figure out where attacks were likely to come from, and picking his own poison, basically, because you're going to be flanked by something with the situation that we found ourselves in there, and it was just very successful for the Soul Flayers. Next game. So this is actually on the top table at the end, after 3 wins and a draw. Top table for the final round. However, because one of my games was a draw, I was a significant distance behind the player in first place, which means that I would basically have to table him and not lose much myself to win the tournament. However, there are also a couple of hungry wolves behind me in the table, which means that if I get absolutely annihilated, they're going to jump ahead of me and knock me out of the podium. If I were to try and sit back and get a draw, maybe thinking that my opponent wouldn't be that wild about pushing out and getting a win, then I still don't think that would be enough, because there would be enough players who are just below me who could get big wins to jump ahead of me, even if I draw, that I think I would still struggle to finish in the podium places playing that way. So my only option is to go for a win. And if it happens to be a big win, and that's enough to win the tournament, that would be great. But I'm just going to go for a win of any kind, rather than trying to do any kind of playing for a draw nonsense. Because if I do that, I don't have that much shooting, so I'd be sitting back and not killing much. And there's a lot of points given out in this event for killing. When I say a lot, there's up to 5 extra points. You get 5 for a loss, 10 for a draw, 15 for a win, and up to 5 for killing things, and up to 5 for victory points. So it's control scenario, which means there are quite a few victory points available. Let's go through my opponent's list. It's, on paper to me, this looks outrageously difficult to deal with. So we've got 4 hordes of Ratkin Nightmares, and yeah, they're kind of like Ogre Boomers, but they look better than Ogre Boomers to me. Someone tell me if they actually are better. But they look really good to me. I think a lot of these units on paper don't look as great as they actually are because there are some synergies within this army. 2 regiments of Vermintide, which are the crummy little swarms. Tunnel Runners, which are kind of similar to a... what's the goblin unit called again? The Mincer. Kind of similar to Mincers. They're quite fast though. 2 Brood Mothers. So, Drain Life 5 on both of them. Radiance of Life. And yeah, just between those two, the shooting that I have is kind of plink damage, isn't it? Because I've got 2 lots of Lightning Bolt 6, 1 Lightning Bolt 3. Unlikely with that to kill one of these units in a round. So with all that healing available, don't think my shooting is going to come into it that much in this game. There's a Brute Enforcer. And let's see, what's the... Okay, so that's rallying, so yeah, even more nerve. 2 of those. There's a Tangle with regeneration, more rallying. So you can get up to +2 with the rallying. So it will stack to some extent. A Shredder, which is a war engine. 2 Shredders, in fact, which are decent long range, 48 inches. And they have a lot of attacks as well, 4. So that's pretty good. And Death Engine Spewer, which is a shorter range weapon. Monster Chariot, it's kind of like a war engine as well though, but it's also good in combat, but its shooting is powerful. So when I look at this list I see, well, I definitely outspeed and outmaneuver this list any day of the week, but it significantly outguns me, I would say. And if I just approach those guns, I can easily get charged and killed by most things on this list. So I think it's a bit of a struggle. That was my thought when I was looking through this. I thought, that's the kind of list I think I'll struggle against. Same kind of thing as with the Halflings earlier. It's a gun line, but when you get there, it's not exactly easy to just wipe the floor with those guns, because they're on some actually powerful fighting units in this instance. They're not relying on other units to do the fighting for them. They are actually powerful themselves, a lot of the shooty units. And yeah, this army has obviously done very well because my opponent was on 4 wins and no losses prior to this point on the day. So with control, I'm thinking also there are no individuals in this army. There are 2 war engines that obviously can't score, but everything else can score. I've got a couple of individuals. I do have good maneuverability and units that can get into position to score in this scenario, but the main thing is trying to win the game and kill lots of stuff because I need to secure my position high up on the table. So I'm going to go for it. So there's my layout. I've got Soul Flares out on the flank. My plan here is to push a unit of Soul Flares forward. They're stealthy, so maybe I'll survive a round of shooting. If I do, I could then charge a war engine if nothing else is going to come over here. And on this flank, I'm going to try and push forward using the Shadowhounds as cover and the Phantoms as cover in this sort of area here. And then try and look for double charges. It's going to be difficult because even if I hit, let's say, the unit of Nightmares, defense 5, so if I hit them with 2 Soul Flare regiments, I would think that would be enough ordinarily, but they've got rallying around them and they're going to be inspired. Most of these units are going to be affected by rallying 2, I think. So they're going to have very high nerve and they're going to be very difficult to deal with. Very synergistic army I'm up against here. So that is the Shredder, Tunnel Runners, Nightmares, Tangle, Brood Mothers, and the... I think they're the Shredders. What was the other one called now? Had an even cooler name, didn't it? Death Engine Spewer. There you go. So turn 1. I go first. I think my opponent wins the roll off and forces me to go first because this is control. So going last gives you the advantage of moving into the table sections that you need to be in, especially considering that I've got so much Wind Blast, which would be a nightmare if you were not going last, because as long as I've got enough of it alive, I can blast you significantly because I've got so much of it. So that unit is now a threat. Come and deal with it. If you can't kill it, it's going to hit something, and that's not going to be fun for you. Ideally, if I can cause a few things from over here to turn, that would be nice. Over here, everything else just rushes forwards. It's a gun line, so I don't want to get shot too much. A lot of the guns are short range over here, so I'm not putting things I care about within range to be shot in the first turn. Only phantoms and scarecrows, I think. Turn 1 for my opponent. So, one of these units is sufficiently distracted by the soul flayers and decides to come over here and try and shoot them. So in hindsight, I could have deployed a little bit further to the left with this unit and avoided this eventuality and just threatened this unit here, which would have either forced them to ignore me or come even further over. And they wouldn't have been able to shoot me in turn 1. As it is, 5 damage gets put on them. And some shooting takes place into these soul flayers, who obviously have cover as well as they're stealthy, and the phantoms take wounds as well. These ones are... There's weakness that's cast on them, so that's what that's representing. And these ones die after only taking 5 damage. So, wow. So it was a decent nerve roll. Took them out because I'm not near the inspiring yet. So that risk hasn't paid off, and I've lost 1 unit for nothing. Although I've got this unit facing the wrong way for a turn, which doesn't do much really because they have steady aim. They can just turn around and join in regardless. Dwarven Darkness is here. No Abyssal Dwarves. No, not this time. Had there not been enough Abyssal Dwarf reports on this channel? It must have been at least 10 tournaments in a row I took those things to. Mostly in a row. Over here, some damage. Not enough to do any killing though. So my turn. Pushing things forward. Scarecrows take the lead obviously. Things I don't want to get charged or shot, staying back a little bit. Things that are fast enough to do so. Okay, so this is where it's going well. Let's have a look at this flank here. So I was given the option of charging both these units. They're both in range here. Charge 1 into the tunnel runners, 1 into the spewer. I decide, you know what, because of the positioning of these units, if I charge the dogs, the shadow hounds, into the tunnel runners, that means that if I charge the spewer, I can't then be charged by them into the soul flayers afterwards. Whereas if I put the dogs into the spewer and put the soul flayers in there, because the angle's involved and the width of the bases, the spewer would have been able to get the flank of the soul flayers. So I decided to kill the spewer. Yeah, it's a decent above average roll to kill it, but it's not totally unheard of. 1 damage to the tunnel runners, and I'm feeling good about this flank now because that thing has to attack the dogs. Probably will kill them, but then it's going to get hit. And it's already on damage. Oh, a lot of these things have iron resolve as well, I should point out. So not only do they have all that drain life, which is, in my opinion, extremely powerful. Some might say too powerful. Or I could just say I think drain life is too powerful, which I will. And there's... what else was there? There was Radiance of Life, was there? There was various sources of either healing units or boosting their nerve. So turn 2 for the rats. Not much, because they obviously are quite happy sitting back and shooting, so they're not going to throw everything into combat. The Mind Screech on the hill is hexed, represented by that, and these soul flayers are weakened. Scarecrows are annihilated with shooting. Reapers take a little bit of damage as well. I think they were shot with one of the war machines in the corner. Shadow hounds are dead. So, tunnel runners. I've got a chance to hit them. Because of the positioning of this guy, right on the edge of the forest, I can hit them unhindered with 2 regiments of soul flayers in the front. This unit is weakened, but I still think that is a decent shot at taking that unit down. I might not get a chance to do something like this again in the game, so I'm going to go for it, because if I can kill that unit, I could pivot them both, stare down the flank of all these rats, Sure, some of them will turn around and shoot me. They'll probably turn around, blast one unit to death. There's still one left, and that means other units further down then have to move so I can't see them, or they have to turn and face me. And I think that would be a really big advantage for me, especially after this flank attack kind of failed at the first hurdle. Because I'm going to be pushing things into combat this turn, so I could just stand there and die, or I could go into combat with the rubbish units. So, double charge. Not enough. They don't do enough damage. Charge in and take out all the chaff, of course, apart from the Shadow Hulk, who fails to kill some Vermintide because he just doesn't have that many attacks. And he can have a slightly bad round and fail horribly. Turn 3 for my opponent. So these Soul Flayers get flanked, these ones get hit. I still think, looking back on it, it was a risk worth taking here, because if I'd taken out that unit, that was a really big advantage I would have there on this flank. So I still would probably do that again. Even if I haven't mathsed it out to figure out exactly how much damage I should be doing and how likely I am to kill that unit, because, yeah, I'd still do it. In the middle, I waver this thing with butchers rather than killing it, which is quite funny. So the Reapers obviously get killed, they get shot to death. And there's this encirclement of rats that just have a billion shots and they're just going to slaughter everybody. Unless I can get something into them. Soulflay is dead, Soulflay is not dead, but they are wounded. So that unit is now on, is that 4? I think they've got a load of their wounds back anyway, so I'm going to have one more go at trying to kill that unit. And then Soulflayers will die. So it could have been so different on that flank. Could have been a very different complexion. This unit wouldn't have been able to get involved in shooting down here. They would have had to worry about that. As it stands, I'm hiding my Soul Flayers here from this shooting onslaught behind the Shadow Hulk, by the way. Mind Screechers are staying out of harm's way and just lightning bolting little bits, which is totally useless because of Iron Resolve and Drain Life and all the other shenanigans going on. Turn 4, and I do manage to finish off some of the chaff now. Only do 3 wounds with the Soul Flayers, so I do get a waver there though. And then I do various bits of wind blasting. So one thing that my opponent thought was a mistake was that I wind blasted this hero here, which took it out of the difficult terrain, which means that it could charge in to this unit unhindered. However, while that is true, I still think that they were going to die. Their chance of dying doesn't go down significantly if this guy's hindered, because he's still looking at their rear and they're on 3 wounds. So either way, I think, because if I'd damaged him with the wind blast, I could have wavered him, for example. Turn 4 for my opponent, and it's getting crunchy now. All these rats that were previously shooting are now showing that they're not just one-trick ponies, or one-trick rats, if you will. They're getting stuck into the combat. This guy goes in behind the Soul Flayers. Everyone's getting stuck in where necessary. This unit's staying back and shooting. And has the Banshee been shot off the table? No, has it? Where was the Banshee? There it is. So I think the Banshee was killed. Soul Flayers take loads of damage, but get double wand. So, could the luck be turning around? Could I actually have a chance to do something here? That unit's so damaged, I could kill them off with the Soul Flayers that have been double wand. However, they are devastated, sadly. Shadow Hulk takes 1 wound, comically. So it's not all over, despite the fact I've lost a lot of units and haven't killed much yet. Still fairly open. These counters here are marking out the zones for control purposes. So I'm hoping to keep the Mind Screechers alive for control purposes as well. Turn 5, Mind Screechers run away a bit and start wind blasting people back or lightning bolting. So I want to push things into that corner really, keep them away from the action. Soul Flayers do kill off those nightmares. Butchers are still stuck fighting. Shadow Hulk's still stuck fighting, so it didn't go that well. Then 5 for my opponent, and units are starting to realise this is a scenario here. We're going to start spreading out looking for the control zones. And I don't have much left now. More damage is dished out. not significant. One of the Mind Screeches is killed, and it's an important one because that was one I was hoping to get into a different scoring zone. Turn 6 for me. So this Mind Screech, the only course of action is to charge into them, because otherwise they can just march straight forward into my scoring area and get 2 instant points. The Mind Screech just charges them in the front, and yeah, I don't manage to kill anything in this turn, in turn 6. So I'm automatically going to lose now if it ends on turn 6, because at the moment my opponent has that section, and I just have my home section with the Mind Screech who's just leaning into it slightly. In my opponent's turn 6, Butchers get flanked by the Tangle. Shadowhulk takes a load more damage, the Butchers take some as well, but do not die. So if the game ended there, that would be a loss. We do get a turn 7, however, so what can I accomplish? Because that Mind Screech is dead, so I don't think I can win at this point. If I kill both the units I'm fighting here, with the Shadowhulk and the Butchers, that would put me in a good position. If I could Lightning Bolt something off with the Horror, or whether I choose to Bane Chant a unit instead to give me a better chance of killing them. So I'm probably not going to win, but I've got a good chance to finish off some units now, which could be useful for getting more tournament points. So I do manage to kill that unit, so that's a load of extra points I've got there. And my opponent in turn 7 shoots off the Shadowhulk, charges the Butchers, kills them, also kills the Horror. So everybody's dead. Lost all the units. Did not win the final game, obviously, but that turn 7 did get me some extra points, which could push me up the leaderboard. And I can reveal there were 28 players at this event, and with my final results of 3 wins, 1 draw and 1 loss, I ended up in 5th place, which I think is very respectable indeed. It's worth plenty of points on the Masters website as well. So puts me a step closer to jumping into the Masters places for the year. At the moment I think I'm outside. I've not been to that many events this year. Some of them were fairly small that I've been to. I didn't attend Clash of Kings this year, which is obviously a massive disadvantage for the Masters because it's worth so much. And any 2-dayer events in parts of the country that I can't strike at easily, then I typically don't go to. So if there's a 2-day event in Nottingham, then that's easy. If it's in Manchester like this one was, then I can stay with family up there. So that's a nice easy one as well. Anywhere else I typically don't bother. So a lot of my scores on the Masters rankings are from 1-day events, which means that not that high. I think there's one more event I'm signed up for this season before the rankings close for the season, and that is in about 2 weeks in Birmingham. So that's a 1-day event, and it's the one that I won a crown at last time with the Best Overall award. So I actually finished 2nd on battle points at that event, but combined with painting and sportsmanship scores, I actually won overall the tournament, which isn't reflected in the rankings because that only takes into account battle score, but I did get a crown, which I am planning to wear at the event. And if somebody else wins the tournament and wins the new crown, then I'm quite happy to coronate them while wearing my crown, of course. So we can have a nice crown squad if it's decided that the crown will be the prize of choice for years to come at that event. Before then, though, I've got a game of Kings of War this week, which is going to be using the new rules from the new book. So I'm going to take Nightstalkers, I'm going to switch things up a little bit, try out some of the units that have been changed, and see how that goes. And then at the weekend, I've got an Age of Sigmar tournament in Nottingham, and I'm just painting the final unit for that at the moment. It's the Chariots for the Stormcast, which is a really nice model, as I've been working on it in sub-assemblies, and I've just assembled it and just need some finishing touches to the base now, I think. But really nice model. And what else is coming up? Nothing majorly exciting. I need to sign up for more events, really, I think. Nothing else on the Kings of War horizon imminently, other than that one in 2 weeks' time, so I need to find some more on the calendar and sign up for those. Let me know what you thought of this. Let me know if you spotted any mistakes that I didn't already cover. So I'll try not to cheat with the Banshee in future and use its ability incorrectly. And let me know if you thought there was anything I could have done against that nasty, nasty rat nightmare list in the final game. I think it's very powerful and definitely not vulnerable to what I was bringing. But if you could spot a way that I could have done something massively different there, I could have, of course, overloaded more units onto the left flank so that they all couldn't be shot down. I could have kept them out of shooting range, but outside of that one thing, what else do you think could have been done in that game to change things? If you thought of anything in Game 2 where I struggled a bit against the Halflings but managed to sneak a draw, then let me know as well, because I consider that to be a very difficult list for my list to face. If you have any other comments on the games or on the paintwork on some of these lovely armies, let me know. And other than that, time to wrap this one up, so check out all the links in the description. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, join Facebook group and all that malarkey. And obviously, because this is such top-notch, red-hot, sizzling, succulent, dishlicious, moist, tender, juicy content delivered straight to your taste buds from my computer and my microphone, why not pledge all your life savings to my Patreon? Failing that, you could always just pledge a small amount instead. But life savings is the preferred option, just making that perfectly clear. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video, obviously, if you haven't liked it already, those of you watching it live. And stay tuned for more juicy Kings of War content, and of course content for other succulent, juicy systems as well. All that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.